If you want the things of your dreams, it starts with creating a future version of yourself. Hi, my name is Bonitatibus, owner and founder of Digital Champions, and this is Let's Grow Together, the show about helping you become the best version of yourself. And today I want to talk about a book that kind of inspired today's episode, which is called Be Your Future Self Now by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I love Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He has so many amazing and incredible books, but this is a book that I actually read like a few years ago and actually had the physical book. But recently, I decided I wanted a new listen. And I think that's really important about content consumption in general, is that a lot of times I see people go book to book to book to book, but don't actually take the time to revisit books that were impactful because based on where we are in our life, can determine how we consume that same exact content. And so I was recently on a car ride and I thought, you know what? What am I feeling? What's really resonating with me in what I want to create? And that's when I started listening this time to Be Your Future Self Now. I have my notes here of just some of the things that I wanted to make sure I highlighted and talk about because to me, this was one of the most impactful audiobook experiences. And I think part of it was because I just had this real intention of what I was going to do with the things that I was learning in this particular book. And the main aspect concept around this is basically that your future self drives your success in who it is that you want to become and how we envision that, how we create that, who we think about. And at the end of today's episode, I will share an exercise that I did that I highly recommend you did because it literally brought me to tears just by doing the exercise. And so I highly recommend you stick around. Because when we think about this, a big part of our future selves is understanding and having clarity of our vision and goal. If we don't know what we want to do and what we want to achieve and where we want to go, then we're just running around with our head cut off, right? So it's so important that we have this clarity and focus and vision in what we want for ourselves, not just in business, but in life. What do we want our life to look like? What do we want our relationships to look like? What do we want our business to look like? What do we want our health to look like? I mean, all the different aspects that come into that future version of ourselves that we want to create. But what's so unique about this concept and what they highlight in the book multiple times is thinking about our future self is a totally different person than who we are today. And often this is kind of like a paradox that happens within our future self is that we think our future self is going to be similar to who we are right now in this moment. But when we look back at our previous self, we're so different than maybe who we were 5 years, 10 years ago. And so when I started reflecting on this and I think about how much I've grown over the last 5, 10 years and where I was 10 years ago to where I am now is completely different. My 10 years ago could never imagine being where I am today. And I'm so grateful for that. But it also showcases that it's practical that my future self in 5 years and 10 years from now has a future that I can't even imagine and fathom right now, and that it is a completely different version of myself. And so, as we reflect and we think about, hey, who is it that we want to become, and how do we kind of figure that out? And so, one of the things that they shared is actually from a quote from Viktor Frankl from Man's Search for Meaning, which is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend. It's about a Holocaust survival and how he was able to just kind of persevere through everything that he went through. And part of that was based on having a why. And Viktor Frankl says, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And I love that because, again, it just showcases that when we have this inherent reason for why we do the things that we do, we can get through whatever obstacles may come our way because our plan's not going to go to plan. That's just not how life works. That's not how things happen and how things progress in our lives. But if we have that general vision, we can keep working towards that. And look, it's going to shift, it's going to change, it's going to evolve as you progress because even like 2 years from now might be different from your 5 year plan now. But that's okay. It doesn't stop us because at the end of the day, what we're really trying to create and think about is who do we need to be to have the things that we want in that future. And this is a concept that was actually brought to my attention years ago that has become a pivotal thing that I've used to get to where even I am today, which is this concept of be, do, have. And so, in order to have the things that we want, we need to do the things that are going to get us the things that we want to have. But in order to do the things that we want, we need to be that person. And so often, the person that we currently identify isn't adapted to actually doing the things that we want to do. And so, to give you an example, this concept for me came around identity with reading, which is perfect for today's episode because here we are talking about a book that I've read. Well, if you look back at my past self, that kid hated reading. And he was told his whole life that he hated reading. Now I'm speaking in the third person. I hated reading growing up, and through my whole life, people just told me I'm not a good test taker, you're not good at reading. And guess what? All the facts and evidence that were in front of me said that. But I adopted that identity. And so I never tried. I never tried to shift that identity. And so when I started on my own personal development journey, I started hearing again and again. I started with audiobooks because I'm not a good reader. And so I started just listening to these books and they all kept talking about reading, reading, reading. And I told myself, oh, I'm not much of a reader. I'm just going to stick to the audio. But the top CEOs, the top successful people, they talked about reading physical books. And I started learning about this concept of identity and this identity that I learned as a kid that I identified as not a reader. So I wanted to shift that identity. And so I started writing down every single day, I am a reader, I am a reader, I am a reader. So it started with this identity of who I needed to be. I am a reader. And then what do readers do? Well, they read. So then I started reading every single day because, hey, I'm a reader. I started shifting that identity. And through that, I was able to develop the skills, the knowledge to get to where I am today. And again, not saying like, well, what I've done is big and amazing, but I have bigger goals and things that I want to achieve. And I'm pretty grateful for where I am today. And I owe a lot of credit to these moments, to these things that I've done, the work that I've put in, the books that I've read to shift into becoming a better version of myself. And so when we really start to think about who do we want to be, it really comes down to behaviors. You know, so often people, oh, I could never do that. Oh, I'm not good at this. Well, you're just creating an identity that's not necessarily true. Just because maybe you haven't done it in the past doesn't mean you can't do it in the future. And so it's so critical that we identify these identities that we keep telling ourselves and ask ourselves, is this true? It may be true now, but does it have to be true? Who's the person that we can bet? Maybe you want to be a better leader. Maybe you want to be a better speaker. Maybe you want to be better on video. It comes down to accepting who do we want to become and then being willing to do the things so we can then have the things that we want. And part of that comes down to our systems and our environment shape a huge aspect of our growth and development in who we're trying to become. Because success doesn't come from willpower alone, right? It comes from the system and the environment that are aligned with the goals that we want to achieve. And so when we're thinking about, right, and this goes down in using just the reading example, is that I set the intention of reading every single day for 10 minutes and being able to do that. It's these activities that do that. But I think what really helped me was that I started surrounding myself with other people that were also reading books. Because most of my friends at the time were not reading books. I was a weirdo. Nick, what are you doing? I'm reading personal development books. What's going on? I felt so isolated in this world. But then I started investing in myself, investing in going to events and communities, which is a whole nother element of investing into your future self, being willing to spend money in these areas. Because to me, when I started investing in books, investing in coaching programs, investing in events, things really started to progress because I started being around people that had the things that I wanted. And I was able to learn from them. They inspired me to do more. I can be more. I can do more. I just got to follow what people before me have done. And so it was so cool. I remember like one of the first conferences I went to, and I started speaking to people, and we started talking about books that were read. Oh, have you read this book? Oh, Atomic Habits. Yeah, I love that book. Oh, have you read this book? Oh, no, let me write that down. And all of a sudden, I just found this community of people that I had no idea existed. But I would have never known that this community was even out there had I not invested in going to this event, invest in these groups. And since those events I've spent thousands upon thousands of dollars into courses, programs, community, networking groups, events, specifically around my own personal development. And I owe so much of where I am today through those programs. And each thing was meant, there's a famous quote, what got you here won't get you there. And that's exactly where it's like these different events progressed me through. And now I'm continuing to think about, hey, well, what I've done so far is not going to get me to my 5-year self from now. Who do I need to become? What do I need to do to attract and acquire the things that I want in that 5-year future? And a big part, like I mentioned, is investing in yourself. And it doesn't necessarily mean, spending money. It's sometimes just where are you investing your time into yourself, making time for yourself, for what to think about. And so this leads to our action item for today in this exercise that to me was so crazy impactful. And I'll share why. The exercise is fairly simple. You write a letter from the 5 years from now version of yourself. And what's really unique about this process is that no one's a better coach for you than you, because you know everything about yourself. You know your flaws, you know the areas that you need to work on, you know what you need to do. And so when I created this and I did mine in just a voice note because I thought that that would be easier and just transcribed it. And I just started speaking directly to my future self from 5 years from now, or to my past self, coming from my version of myself from 5 years from now. And during it, I started highlighting things on what my business looked like, being super aligned, loving it, having a team of people that are aligned with my vision and my goals. I talked about having a nonprofit. I talked about a family. I talked about a partner, what I look for in a partner, what I want from that partner. I talked about things that I need to give up right now. So it was like, hey, you're here where you are because you gave up these things, because you stopped doing these things, helped you to create this future. And I was hearing, and the thing that really hit me the most that like brought me to tears was I specifically mentioned, being able to take care of my parents and being able to have them travel and like them not have to worry about money anymore. I'm even just thinking about it because that's always been a goal of mine to be able to help the people that played such a big role in me and helping me. And I want to give back to them. And I know they don't expect anything. And I don't think as parents that you want to give everything to your kids. But to me, I want more for them. I want them to, you know, and I know I don't have a ton of time. My parents are in their 60s, but 5 years from now, I'm like, okay, well, that's not too far off. And being in the home care industry, I think about I had mentioned, like, getting them the absolute best care that they deserve, where if they need 24/7 around the clock care, that I wanna be able to afford the very best, and that's what I love about being in the home care industry is already thinking and preparing for something like that so that I can take care of my parents, but I know that, home care is not a cheap thing. You guys know it if you own a home care agency, and so for me, this just, like, hit me on a whole deeper level, and this has always been a aspect of my why in, wanting to help those people that were so supportive in me and wanting to give back to them. I mean, I have this Post-it note that says, "For a trip to Italy for those that matter." And really that's actually for my parents. Unfortunately or fortunately, my parents are actually already planning a trip to Italy that I was not responsible for, but it's really cool because that was something that me and my brothers, when we're giving gifts to them, we wanted to focus more on like, hey, how can we give experiences? And we started, you know, doing savings accounts. So maybe we contributed a little bit to this, but regardless of what it is, thinking about this future self and this version of me and being coached from my future version just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I wanted to share this message with you. And I really strongly encourage you to either take this episode and just do it. I mean, hopefully, I've given you enough of the fundamental pieces that will help you to create the future version of yourself and really think about who that is. But also, I highly recommend you check out this book. I mean, Dr. Benjamin Hardy has a ton of awesome books. Another one called Gap and the Gain, which I really love. That one's more about just like seeing the positive, but becoming that future version of yourself. But here's the thing. You don't need to do this alone. There's tons of amazing resources out there for you to help become that future version of yourself. Get the help, collaborate, work with people, and let's grow together.